Hello students, happy day. It's one of those cold rainy days and I'm just sitting by the fire drinking tea, and we're going to talk about authentic assessments for a few minutes because we didn't get to talk about it in class very much the other day. So, as we're designing significant learning experiences for students, remember one of those things on the board that we want to have significant learning experiences is one of the components of great teaching. A key part about that is designing authentic assessments that make sense, that really measure what we want them to measure. I forget if I've told you this story or not, so just bear with me, I'm sorry. But a lot of higher education is like this. It's like if flight school were run like this. Okay, so for the first part of flight school, you have to learn to take off. So somebody takes off, the pilot gets 100%. I think I have told you this story. And then the next part about flight school is she has to learn to land the plane, and she doesn't do well landing the plane, so she gets a 0%. But she does well flying the plane, so she gets an A there. So she has 2 A's and an F, and so that averages together to be a 75%, and she passes flight school. Yay! You want to take a ride with her? No! Okay. A lot of education's like that. It's not competency-based, okay? It's just an average of across if you have skills across competency areas without making sure that you have competencies in particular key areas. That's problematic because some competencies are critical to have, such as landing a plane. The other problem we have in terms of how we do assessments in terms of schooling is, well, another problem is that it's a lot of normative comparisons, right? It's not so much ipsative compared to yourself. It's like, how well did you do in comparison to group? Well, you got an 83%, or you got whatever on the curve, you got this. But it doesn't really matter as far as, well, how much did you master the material? Or how much did you learn? Instead, we often compare how many people got A's, how many people got B's, those kind of things. It's not very useful, okay, in terms of real-world stuff because it doesn't tell us if you mastered the material, okay? The other problem is that oftentimes our assessments we use in class have nothing to do with the real world. I know you know this, so think for a minute. Have you ever taken a true-false test or a multiple-choice test that has nothing to do, no connection with what you're actually going to do in the real world? You have. Have you ever written a paper that immediately after it's done, or even while you're writing it, you're like, this is stupid. No one's going to read this. This doesn't matter. Why am I even writing this paper? You've probably had that happen to you a time or two before. So the solution to that is authentic assessments. Okay, there's a couple different examples of this that I want to talk about. Basically, authentic assessments mean that our assessment measures in class, how we evaluate the extent to which a person learned, should mirror what happens in the real world. Let's think about some ways we can make things better. One is problem-based learning. Okay, problem-based learning is giving students messy, complex, ugly, difficult cases, examples, and having them struggle with it, often in groups, as far as what does it mean. I'm working on a problem-based learning activity right now that will give you a good example of an authentic assessment. I'm writing a book on child psychopathology in my spare time. Yeah, but it's really been a while since I've done anything on it. But I am writing that book. I will write that book. Hold me to that. Email me in like a year and say, how's your book coming? What I'm doing as a part of that book is we're creating an electronic portfolio of a child's file. Okay, so if you were at 7 counties or wherever, you get a CPS, or wherever you work, TCBS, you give a giant thick file on a kid, and that file would contain psych evals, some outdated, some current, treatment notes, CPS reports, medical doctor reports, therapist notes, discharge summaries, psych evals, all different kinds of stuff. And it's up to you to make sense of what information is useful, what information is valid. How do I make all this information into something useful that looks like a treatment plan or an intake questions or possible tentative diagnosis or whatever else? That's an example of a problem-based learning kind of a exercise. It mirrors what happens in the real world. It's muddy, there's not clear answers to it, and it does really promote students' learning and skills in an area where we really want them to develop. Another example of good authentic assessments is practicum. Think about it for a minute. That mirrors what you're going to be doing in the real world. So when you do assessments, when you do therapy, when you do consultation, all those things, those skills that you develop on practicum are clearly relevant for what you're going to do in your job as a psychologist. That's why, one of those reasons why you learn so much on practicum, because of that. A third example of something I think is an authentic assessment is the new quals process. You all had a lot of complaints about the old quals process, which were valid complaints, because you said, this is a straw man's argument. This doesn't really matter. We won't have to do this in real life. Point taken. Yeah. The new quals process is much more focused on, can you conceptualize someone on the fly, write a good understanding of what that person is, tentative diagnosis, what tests you would give, where you would begin treatment, evidence-based treatment. You have to have that skill every day as a clinician. You have to be able to do those quick consultations. You have to be able to formulate a treatment plan. You have to be able to use the evidence to figure out what model am I operating in, how am I going to incorporate the evidence and the research for this client in this situation with these client characteristics and these therapist characteristics and all those other variables. Walker and London, all the other good stuff. If you haven't read it, read it. I like Walker and London's revision by Satterfield too. It's really cool. It's more transdisciplinary. So those are some examples of more authentic assessments. My guess is when you look back over your life, you're going to find lots of examples of things that have been very authentic assessments and some examples of things that have been useless, kind of, why am I doing this, busy work, okay? What I want you to do, I'd love it if you thought more about this and made a list of what activities are more busy work, not useful, inauthentic assessments, and what in your life has been authentic assessments. And as you think about how you would design significant learning experiences for students, and as you think about the assessment component of what purpose is assessment for in a class, what purpose is evaluation, what good are grades, what's my goal for grading, how do I assess mastery and competence, and what activities can I give to promote mastery and competence? I want you to think about those questions as we move ahead. Okay, so one more thing. If you haven't walked over the Big Four Bridge yet, it opened yesterday, and it's really awesome. I got to run over it from Spalding. It's about maybe, 6 or 7 mile run from Spalding. Good run. And it's really cool, so I encourage you to, take a walk or a hike or bring your dog or your skater or your scoop board or your significant other and go over the Big Four Bridge. It's really neat. Go right by the tumbleweeds on the river. And some days are good for running and some days are good for goofing off. So goofing off, like sitting by the fire and making podcasts and drinking tea, it's 40 and rainy. Really, people, it's a better day to goof off. So, all right, I will talk to you later. Have a good